Will Week 10 be the sleeper weekend of the 2025 college football season? Well, it has the potential to bring some entertaining and electric football with a conference championship rematch, an SEC elimination game, and a top matchup in the Big Ten that is must-watch TV. The games start with Arizona State on the road in Ames to face Iowa State, which program will control their own destiny in the Big 12. Ole Miss welcomes the South Carolina Gamecocks in a battle for postseason survival. And a Big Ten clash in the shoe, Penn State versus Ohio State, a game that will help determine who is playing in Indianapolis for a Big Ten title. Let's dive into the first weekend of November for the 2025 season. Game 1. Iowa State welcomes Arizona State to Jack Trice Stadium. This is the second meeting between the two, as the previous encounter was last season's Big 12 championship game, where the Sun Devils slowly crushed the Cyclones in Arlington. The crushing was mostly done by a great individual performance from Cam Skattebo. This time around, ASU won't have their star running back and will have to depend on Sam Leavitt and the offensive weapons around him. What will help those guys deliver and win a lot of games in 2025 is their veteran offensive line, with 4 starters returning from last season's conference championship team, and Jameto Obigbo, who is transferring in from Texas State. Obigbo should find some competition for the left guard position with Sean Naa, who started 7 games for the Sun Devils in 2023. This unit should keep ASU in the top 20 for rushing yards again. On the other side of the ball, the Sun Devils will also have a veteran defensive line. CJ Fight and Jacob Rich Konkaika are back in the interior. At the ends, Prince Dorbay and Clayton Smith return as well. The practices when number 1O and the number 1D go up against each other must be some intense sessions, because iron sharpens iron. The reason why this game might have the same result from the 2024 meeting is the Sun Devils secondary. It's one of the best areas on the field for ASU, with Keith Abney, Javon Robinson, and Miles Ghost Rouser coming back. The 3 started in all 14 games last season. Zavon Alfred is back as well, and he started in 13. A battle-tested secondary that held the Cyclones to 40 less yards than the average passing yards per game for Iowa State in Arlington. Plus, Abney got an interception that helped put the nail in the coffin in burying Iowa State last time out. There's also a transfer pickup, Hydrich Breedlove, a well-traveled player in the portal. Breedlove started in 11 games for Purdue and had 3 of the 4 Boilermaker interceptions in 2024. Now, how the hell does the home team overcome all of the things I just mentioned? Well, protecting the dang ball and dominating in the trenches, as this is our 3rd game covering Iowa State for our SpOp 2025 previews. We've mentioned Rocco Beck in week 0, who will most likely get neutralized in this contest, and we just got done hyping up the talent coming back in week 9 in the backfield, in the trenches, and some top defensive players. But none of those units will matter unless the Cyclone defensive line comes through. Iowa State loses 3 players in the line to graduation, the portal, and the NFL from 2024. Not great when you know ASU is going to bring a very experienced offensive line into Ames. The lineup up front will have to play close to perfect. Even with that star Sun Devil running back gone, Arizona State is still going to impose their will through the running game, especially on the road. If Matt Campbell and his Cyclone defense can't find an answer for this, we might see a bit of the same from the 2024 championship game. So, can Iowa State mount a defense that can stuff the run enough and minimize the damage through the air? Because Arizona State is coming into Ames with a mindset of returning to Arlington to defend their Big 12 title, and don't care if a windy storm is in their way. Game 2, we are back in Oxford for South Carolina versus Ole Miss. This game might turn out to be a bit of a bust before it's played, as each of these programs have some tough tests to pass for this matchup to matter. And maybe one of our honorable mention games will be more high profile when week 10 comes. We're also talking about this November weekend, months before the 2025 season actually starts. But regardless of all that, let's talk about these fringe teams in the Southeastern Conference. Beginning with the Ole Miss Rebels, who we've discussed about in Week 8 against Georgia and Week 5 for the game against LSU. This one at home with the Gamecocks is going to be a real challenge for the Rebels' offensive line, as this season they only have 2 starters at the same position back, and just like at wide receiver, had an overhaul in the trenches. This is why Ole Miss won't make our SpOp top 25 offensive lines like they did in 2024. Sorry, Rebel fans. The projected starters will most likely be different by the time we get to this November game, and I'd expect one of those portal guys to slot in for injuries or poor outings by the projected starters. I also expect this game's margins to be closer compared to last season because of the drop-off in the Rebels' running game and protection of Austin Simmons. But it is a game in November, and whoever starts for Ole Miss could or should be consistent enough to definitely slow and probably not stop the South Carolina pass rush. The uphill battle for the Rebel defense is their secondary. That is in a similar transition like the offensive line. 4 of the 5 expected starters are out of the portal and have the 5th defensive back stepping up. I don't think this department will keep Lenoir Sellers quiet like in 2024, and hopefully the secondary can stay healthy by the time Ole Miss gets to this game on their schedule, as 2 of those expected starters suffered season-long injuries last year. At least the Rebels' front 6 looks promising. To the away team, South Carolina, who we've now covered in Week 4 against Missouri in Columbia, Week 5 against LSU in Baton Rouge, and Week 9 against Alabama at home. Just imagine if the Gamecocks win every one of those games up to this point. Just bananas if they can make that run, and why we are covering them in this early November game. They have mismatches that favor them versus the Bayou Bengals and Crimson Tide. With the pass rush they bring, South Carolina can also catch Missouri off guard with early season woes that can get them a big SEC road win. For this game, the Gamecocks wide receiver core might be the difference, as Lenoir Sellers' top 2 targets from this group are back. Plus, he has some new faces to connect with. Malik Clark, who is the number 15 wide receiver from the 2025 class, and a couple of other 4-star receivers join the ranks out wide. But wait, there's more. Lenoir's little brother, Jaden, joins his sibling in Columbia. The younger Sellers was the older Sellers' favorite target back in high school, and the 2 won a state title together. Gamecock fans, y'all must be rubbing your hands together as this pass attack should hit another level for 2025. So, South Carolina needs to expose Ole Miss's secondary by breaking the ceiling through the air. And the Rebels need to try and keep Dylan Stewart and Brian Thompson Jr. quiet. This game should not be a blowout like last season, and we should expect this contest to deliver an entertaining SEC matchup. Honorable mentions for Week 10. USC takes a trip to Lincoln to face Nebraska for a mid-table position in the Big Ten. We'll see if the Cornhuskers can get their first ever win over the Trojans. The Fighting Irish head to the East Coast for the Leahy Memorial Bowl against Boston College to see who wins the Ireland Trophy. The world's largest cocktail party comes to Jacksonville for the last time as the Florida Gators play the Georgia Bulldogs for the 102nd time if you are repping Florida, and for the 103rd time if you are rooting for Georgia. By the way, it's also not the last time it's going to be in Jacksonville. The game will return to the city in 2028. And for the second time ever, SMU will clash with the Miami Hurricanes in Dallas. We'll see if Miami, with what they have, makes some noise this season. The final game is another massive bout in the Big Ten, as we are back in Columbus for Penn State versus Ohio State. Nittany Lions, Buckeyes. Franklin Day at the shoe for the 41st time. Depending on who you talk to, this matchup is probably the second or third biggest game for 2025 and is a must-watch contest for you and me this season. Let's start with the reigning national champions, Ohio State. You guys, I'm a bit concerned for the Buckeye running game as the Scarlet and Gray have to replace two studs lost to the NFL in the backfield. Maybe you Ohio State fans out there can convince me that I'm wrong and a complete idiot, but I think the quality will have a bit of a dip, maybe even a huge decline of production, which doesn't mean the Buckeyes won't lack in an effective or lethal offense, just a shift in the approach. We'll see if James Peoples can step up and transfer portal get CJ Donaldson can replace Junkins and Henderson. Now, my other concern for the running game is the shortage of experience for the offensive line depth. Last year, Ohio State suffered some injuries in the trenches, but shuffled around some linemen and had the depth to plug and play. For 2025, do the Buckeyes have those luxuries this time around? Probably not. Just a ton of hope for a guy in a hypothetical situation steps in and is solid enough just to get by, specifically at the tackle positions, which is why head coach Ryan Day made moves to reinforce through the portal. Fingers crossed the Buckeyes don't experience this nightmare scenario. Switching to the defense, the Ohio State secondary, just like in the other parts of the 2024 lineup, lost players to the NFL, with two starters returning for the Buckeyes and one of those starters back. Davison Igbinosa tallied an interception against the Nittany Lions last season. The other DBs, not Caleb Downs, will be guys moving up into starting roles. I still expect the Scarlet and Gray to have a no-fly zone that could keep Penn State under 200 yards again, regardless if the Nittany Lions picked up some weapons in the portal. Now to the away team, Penn State, who have an 8-game losing streak to the Buckeyes and haven't beaten Ohio State since 2016, or even gotten a win over them in Columbus since 2011. That was Joe Paterno's last season in charge of the Nittany Lions. Since we mentioned a no-fly zone for their opponents and the likelihood the home team executes an excellent pass defense, this means the run game for Penn State needs to come correct, which is good for the Nittany Lions because they have two outstanding running backs returning for 2025, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. Both of these backs had over 1,000 yards each, but only combined for 42 yards on the ground in last year's game against Ohio State. That's why they need to come correct. Penn State will have a more experienced offensive line than their opponent's D-line. This imbalance is something James Franklin has to take advantage of. On the defensive side, and since we are talking a lot about no-fly zones, the Nittany Lions secondary will be key in stopping the Ohio State passing attack. Penn State will have 2 and almost a half starters back for 2025. The full 2, Taki Wheatley and AJ Harris, were the program's top 3 for DBs and total tackles. They also help the Nittany Lions hold the Buckeyes to under 200 passing yards and Jeremiah Smith to 4 catches for only 55 yards. This game is later in the season, and maybe the newer pieces will have enough experience to prepare themselves for this matchup in Columbus. Slide in note, Penn State's new defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, was Ohio State's DC for the last 3 seasons. Maybe that's the edge the away team might have in winning this massive game against the Buckeyes. So, when either team neutralizes their opposition's pass attack, it will be up to the other offensive elements to pick up the slack and capitalize. Basically, whoever can figure out how to properly play to their strengths and weaknesses. This is why you can't miss this one in the shoe, because it will have an impact on who plays in Indy and gets that first round bye in the college football playoff. Okay, we'll see you guys again for some more week-by-week previews for the 2025 college football season. And bye-bye for now from the couch.